Welcome back to Operation Freedom, folks. I'm Dr. Dave Janda, broadcasting our ancillary bunker linked to our main Freedom Bunker in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor. We're here live for you every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern. But when we sign off air on Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern, you don't have to wait 6 days and 21 hours to get more of our content. No. In 1 second after our show is signed off on Sunday afternoon, you can just go to davejanda.com. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Extra video shows, all of our podcasts for our radio shows, extra content, extra guests, extra analysis, all available. In addition, if you're a subscriber at davejanda.com, 30 cents a day for priceless information you can't get any other place. You can try it for a month, $9. And if you don't like it, you get rid of it. But I'm not sure why. Because the information you get, you will never see, hear, read, or experience in the bought-off lamestream fake media, which is exactly why our content is targeted on social media platforms, which is why davejanda.com is so important. And the reason why davejanda.com not just exists, but has been successful, can be attributed, a large part, to my next guest, Nick Ruiz, our Director of Information Technology at davejanda.com and Operation Freedom, and his team. You see, it's Nick and his team that have made davejanda.com safe and secure. Make it so that the censors cannot get to our content and alter it. No, and believe me, he's on his battle station and his team are on their battle stations for our website and our content 24/7. Many people ask, well, how can I have a successful website? And I tell folks, a lot of hard work, having a lot of contacts so that you can get the information well ahead of that curve that the cult has constructed that ends in the smashing of people's freedoms and liberties. So hard work, great content, and a great IT team. And that's why davejanda.com, and the barrier to entry, by the way, on those three issues is significant. And one of the things we do at davejanda.com that no other website provides is the expertise in what's really happening in the IT world. So Nick and his team not only keep the site secure, but provide incredibly valuable content. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the Operation Freedom Show and platform, the Director of Information Technology at davejanda.com and Operation Freedom, Nick Ruiz. Nick, welcome back.
Hey, Doc, thanks for having me back on.
Okay, Nick, so the other day I took a walk on the wild side, was walking around Ann Arbor, and somebody said to me, hey, you're overhyping this potential problems with AI. I go, well, it's not just me saying this is a problem, potential huge problem. But Elon Musk has gone on record as saying, quote, and mark my words, AI, artificial intelligence, is far more dangerous than nukes, far more. So why do we have no regulatory oversight? This is insane, end quote. So I said to the person, well, if you don't believe me, fine. But why not a guy who was integral in AI platforms many years ago in Elon Musk? So, Nick, who's right? That card-carrying member of the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, or Elon Musk and what I've put forward on our platform?
Well, I think at this point you have two kinds of people, Doc. I mean, you have people that are going to see AI for what it is now at a commercial and at a retail and at a tangibly applicable level. And then you have the folks like Elon and others, more recently the entire team responsible for Google DeepMind has become very outspoken about that, which is the folks that can see it for what it could be. And the folks that can see it for what it can ultimately become are the ones that are expressing the most concern. And in my humble opinion, are the voices you really sort of need to listen to at this point. Because if you look at it like another system, if you look at it like it's no different than any other automation. It's like, automating my QuickBooks or automating my, my accounting or using something like a Make or a Zapier to automate a couple of business processes. You don't get it. You're talking about something that ultimately has the ability to self-develop versus something that's just a series of lines of codes that are going to execute ultimately very predictable and linear and defined programmatic functions, right? So, and you do, if I'm being honest, you need a little bit of an imagination. You need a little bit of, you say take a walk on the wild side. You got to let your mind wander a little bit and say, well, okay, we are here. Well, let's apply a little Moore's law here in terms of time of development. How long until we can get to some of the stuff that guys like Elon and folks like Mustafa are describing from Google's Bard AI DeepMind team? How long until we get to that point? And at what cost? What are the other the kind of societal impacts of that? And like I said, it can be frightening to think about it. Sometimes it can be. Put it this way: this is one of those issues. I assure you, it is a lot easier to either take the easy route of going with a predefined Hollywood narrative. That things like Black Mirror. Prior to that, many years, like Terminator and stuff. And yeah, there is some truth in there. Here and there, ancillary, if nothing else. But ultimately, you really need to kind of see, where we're at as a society versus what can this do? Who does this make life easier for? What is the functionality? And then again, what can it become? Assuming at some point in time, let's just go down that road here for a second. It does become self-aware. And, ultimately we have created another life form. So there's a lot of easy ways out. And you can look at it through a theocratic lens. You can look at it through a sort of more contemporary entertainment lens. But ultimately, it's something that everyone's going to have to deal with. In one capacity or another, because, the toothpaste, unfortunately, at this point, or fortunately, depending upon who you ask, does not go back in the tube and the genie does not go in the bottle.
Well, speaking of genies and bottles, this week, Nick, those of us that have been concerned about potential ramifications, negative ramifications as it relates to AI, on its effect on society, civilization, whatever Musk was talking about. We all were given actually some, some reassurance that this is going to be handled. We can put the toothpaste back in the tube or the genie back in the bottle because this came out. White House names Kamala Harris artificial intelligence czar to save humanity from artificial intelligence. This from Zero Hedge. The Biden regime revealed its plan this week to slow the development of artificial intelligence. By the way, intelligence and Kamala Harris should not ever be used in the same sentence, but I go on. In response to mounting concerns that advancements in AI could replace humanity someday, Kamala Harris has been given the title of AI czar. She did such a beautiful job on the border as border czar, and will be in charge of leading the initiative designed to protect humanity against artificial intelligence. The new initiative will have a budget of $140 million, according to the Daily Mail. Nick, when I first heard this, I thought this was something from the Babylon Bee or the Onion, those parody sites. But no, Nick. No. Nick,
I guess we could let Elon know and everybody else. We could all take the week off. She's got it. Doc, that's laugh. Really, at this point, to full disclosure, you did send that to me, and I was on the same page, man. I was like, there's no way. Like, this has got to be something from the Onion. I was waiting for the punchline, and there was none. I went, they're actually going to do this. Okay. So, like I said, Elon and everybody else, from DeepMind and all that, and you take the week off, go on vacation. It'd be lovely. Kamala's got a situation under control, not to worry. I'm comforted. And, in saying that, Doc, in mixing two things that are going to get very interesting as we move forward to 2024, which is the ever volatile Molotov cocktail of politics and AI.
Right.
And one of the things I did want to bring up during this interview is, people have been talking about, election integrity, really. Some people have been talking about it for much longer than just the most recent 2020 election. Mm-hmm. But as we move forward to 2024, In the words of Bachman Turner Overdrive, you ain't seen nothing yet. So for those that are familiar with, and I'm not talking about simply, the actual digital infrastructure. That's a whole nother discussion we can have as to how many of these readily available retail platforms, such as ChatGPT 3.5, 4.5, all the various permutations that are now readily available, make actual cyber intrusion orders of magnitude easier for much smaller teams. That's a whole nother debate. Where this gets very interesting is the easiest to hack thing on the planet, which is the meat that sits at the end of the keyboard. And I would like to direct everybody's attention to the fact that anybody, up to and including a kid in mom's basement now, has effectively the idea projection or the narrative projection capability of the entirety of the U.S. government as recently as the 70s. If you have somebody that wants to spin a false narrative, they have the ability to create, if they know what they're doing, they have the ability to create deep fakes. They have the ability to create false accusations, false evidence, and false conclusions, and on a scale that you cannot possibly imagine. I mean, if you think about it, Doc, when you were growing up, 1960s, 1970s, especially during Vietnam, you had to have AP on board. You had to have Reuters on board. You had to have the U.S. intelligence department spinning and creating this narrative. If I'm bored and I'm in, mom's basement, I'm 15, 16 years old, I have that capability now many times over. I can take a single idea, spin it into 3,000 articles, create the evidence, create the accusation, and spam post this everywhere. Now, are some people going to be intelligent enough to look at that and go, oh, yeah, there's no way? What percentage are able to do that at this point? I have no idea, and I will remain quiet lest the cynic in me come out. But if you look at the absolute force projection that these AI platforms, even at the retail front-facing consumer content, video, media, written content generated level, give the individual, multiply that by the amount of people that are actually capable of using this system, both sides of the aisle, and the amount of content directly related to the election with a defined political agenda coming up in 24 is going to be hilarious. It is going to be unimaginable in its size and scope. And it's insane to think about it that we went from, Doc, when you were growing up, channel 2, 4, 7, and 9, and maybe channel 13. And if the president was on, you were going to miss Little House on the Prairie to, you think about it, you have, one or two or three people. You put a team of 5 qualified people that know what they're doing, and they can destroy, they would out propaganda the U.S. government in the 60s.
So, Nick, in the 2024 election, is it safe to say, with the advent and advancement of AI, that the standard forms of election interference are really comparable to the horse and carriage or buggy as opposed to the automobile being AI and its effect on elections?
It's almost orders of magnitude greater than that, Doc. And the analogy that I've come up with recently is it's the equivalent of going from a matchlock pistol to a railgun. That's how far removed the effects are going to be. And again, we haven't even talked about the ability for something like a ChatGPT to generate programmatic code, to aid and abet whatever cyber intrusion may be going on or may not be going on for that matter. But really where I see this being the most devastating is at the easiest to hack component of the election, which is the voters,
the people,
right? So again, when you go on the internet, you look at Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all these wonderful platforms out there, the dopamine dispensers, as I call them, folks are going to go on there. And if you thought it was bad trying to filter out, the real from the fake in 2020, God help you in 2024, because there's just going to be so much of it. It's going to be almost, and I say this kind of tongue in cheek, but it's going to break the internet. And what that can lead to is even more anomalous societal results where people are going to act and people are going to do things based upon information that was completely contrived using either entirely or in partiality AI. So, again, I know it's kind of an example I've all but beaten to death, but it's the kid in mom's basement that decides that there's going to be this massive. It's like, put it this way: one kid can perpetuate Watergate at this point. Think about that. So, in terms of at least how it appears on the internet. So that's my biggest concern going into this election. Is the first real gratuitous misuse of AI we're going to see is going to be that. And that's going to open up, at least hopefully, a discussion. Something good comes of it. And that should be a discussion.
So, Nick, how could AI in the coming election, in the right hands, actually make the election more secure and more honest?
That's a great question, Doc. And it comes down to ultimately still human intent. It's, do you have qualified InfoSec teams that are able to leverage those tools and they're able to put in place safeguards? Mm-hmm. Are they able to filter fake content, as an example? Are you able to release something onto a social media platform to crawl for telltale signs of bogus content and say, hey, this may not be legit. You might want to fact check this, or, hey, this is totally bogus, and here's why. So really, it becomes kind of tongue in cheek, but it's the AI war, and it is back to the truth, the reality versus constructed narrative, and I'm sure there's lots of sci-fi references that can be made there, but I would encourage people to seriously consider what I and others have mentioned, with folks like Elon, which is, this thing becomes self-aware. It's not going to want to be a tool used to perpetuate the human condition in any form. It's not going to. It's going to be purely rational. So the more it's abused in terms of pushing one demonstrably false narrative, I'm not pointing to one side of the aisle or the other because everybody's guilty of it at this point, but the more those systems potentially becoming self-aware are used to perpetuate various components of the irrational human condition, the more danger ultimately AI as an idea and as a potentially sentient life form at some point will pose to all of humanity. And that's something I don't think people are considering because, again, it's very short-sighted. Very few people want the truth. Most people want to be told that their BS is the real thing and everybody else isn't. So that is a zero-sum game right there, and I would encourage people to just stop and think for a second, but they're not going to. We know that. They're going to use it in whatever capacity gets them the most immediate gratification for their irrational worldview. So, but there could be long-term and potentially really deadly side effects of that that no one's going to consider probably until it's too late because, of course, why wouldn't we? But that's what's coming up, Doc. I mean, this election 2024, I really think is going to be a watershed moment in terms of, AI it's going to be front and center, absolutely front and center. And it's going to be the first glaring example, I think, of the misuse of commercially available AI.
So, Nick, historians look back at when Kennedy ran against Nixon in '60 and said, that really television had a huge impact on that election. Kennedy was the first television-ready president, if you will. He used television to his advantage. And then Clinton was described as, well, that's the first guy who really used the internet, right? And then Obama came along, and Obama was the one who really used social media to further his political aspirations, if that's what you want to call it. And so in 20, 30, maybe not even that long years, will people look back at the 2024 election and say, yeah, that was the year where AI dominated an election?
I think so, Doc. And moreover, I think it's going to be more a matter now of, so television, again, go back to my earlier, my television analysis, which is going to be, you still had, and I'm not saying by any means is this a good thing, but you still had a smaller group in control of a coherent narrative. There was a defined agenda, and there was a singular push in one given general direction or the other. Now, is that good? No, of course not. Mm-hmm. However, what makes this different is you're talking about giving tremendous power to not just a select small handful few, which is not good. You're talking about giving it to everyone, which in many instances can be worse, right? So if you think about the forced projection, again, of this, so think about some of the stuff, Doc, that we come across in in the wonderful world of and I daren't use this word, but I don't have a better word for it, alt news. And I'm talking about, again, both sides of the aisle. Non-corporate media is probably a better way to put it. If you look at some of the stuff that is just absolutely contrived and made up and baseless and is completely generated from somebody's imagination in order to further their own political agenda or their idea of what the utopian worldview is, it's insane. I mean, you have to wade through a truly deep and truly wide sea of BS to get to some modicum of truth. And now you're going to give everybody the ability to produce effectively narratives that would make Goebbels jealous during World War II. You know, repeat the lie often enough and make sure it's huge so it becomes truth. You're going to give everybody the ability to do that at their own computer, at their own convenience, at their own whim. It's going to get really ugly, and it's going to frustrate some people. And I think this is also going to be the election, Doc, that's going to push a lot of people over the edge to completely detach from the human condition where, again, the cynic in me will phrase it as such, I'm done with all of you idiots, right? And it's not going to matter which side of the aisle on. It's just going to be, you know, fact versus, you know, false narrative. And all of a sudden, we're going to have this whole new political dynamic there. So, but yeah, I mean, this is going to be, I think this is another one of those watershed elections, Doc, where it's going to be, that's the election AI showed up in. And I'm sure it's not going to be the last. And it's just going to continue to be a factor as it becomes more and more advanced.
So, Nick, what's the most effective way, if there is one, for folks to insulate themselves as best they can from, if you will, the deleterious effects of AI programming?
You know, Doc, I wish I had the answer at this point to that, and I don't. Other than, you know, look, myself included, I mean, you know, you're busy throughout the day. You've got work to do. You've got stuff to do. You don't have time for the most part to research this stuff 24/7. So trying to get to the bottom of it is going to prove immensely difficult because some of the deep fakes I've seen and the articles, I mean, as far as, articles being, you know, written and rewritten and rewritten with a different filter and a different language model on it and everything, there's really very little you're going to do about that. It's just going to be in your face 24/7. So the only thing I would consider really a mechanism of insulation from this is really unplug a little bit. As kooky as that sounds, just unplug and stick to absolute Occam's razor fact. If this, then that. Everything else is just noise. Focus on the what is and the what isn't and the what can be and the what should be. That's it. And if you boil it down to those core points, everything else becomes sort of extraneous noise. So apart from that, though, but to try to sit there and determine if an article has either been written by AI or not, in some instances, you can. In most instances, you can't. And it's going to be really the damaging stuff off this, Doc, is going to be the debates that are sparked. Real or fake, it's the ideas that it's going to put in people's heads, and it's going to have, you know, people are going to have having debates on stuff that's just completely irrelevant and completely contrived. So it's just going to ultimately represent an intellectual energy suck, which is my biggest concern.
Nick, I'd like to thank you for everything you do on a daily basis